Juliet. Those scenarios pop up in all countries, in all centuries. And why haven't we seen a novel featuring an Irish rebel son and an English love interest? So one of the central themes in this novel is a very controversial marriage between an Athenian son and an English piano prodigy. And the young man actually was sent to Dublin to study at University College, which was a new institution accepting Catholic students. And the young woman's father was his professor. And he was apparently the favorite student until he married the professor's daughter. Funny how that happens. But this novel really focuses on the family of the young men. The main character is Brendan Malone, and he has two sons, Dylan and Hugh. And the boys are less than a year apart, and they both go to college at the same time. Dylan is a little bit of a simpleton, and he is totally committed to his father. He doesn't question his father's ideology, but Hugh, he's very sickly and not so inclined to follow in his father's footsteps. And when he goes to Dublin to study to be a perfect Irishman, he actually finds out that he likes being an Englishman more. So since my voice is a little rattly, I'm going to have my husband, Mr. Neary, come and read a passage from the novel.
Hello? Is this loud enough? Brendan Malone was an incurable dreamer. Such a volatile soul could only have flown out the austere Victorian era, when England had cemented its control over its nearest colony. Born in 1870, Brendan had missed a great deal of the misfortunes that had plagued Ireland mid-century. The Great Famine, the Crimean War, the mass emigration into America. He regretted having been born too late and therefore not given the chance to partake in the uprising of 1867. Out of that mixture of blighted potato, poaching, blood, and tears, the Fenian movement had been born. It was a peculiar manifestation of the Celtic nature, a rebel tune sucked out of the dirty thumb of a nation. Ireland, exhausted by a string of failed insurrections, slumbered, shrouded in apathy. All the heroic feats of Brendan's dreams had come down to a few skirmishes with local authorities during the land wars of the 1890s. Nobody had gotten hurt, but many had cursed and spat. He derived his military theory exclusively from folk legends, having nothing else at his disposal. He would fall asleep and wake up to the same vision, a green flag swaying over the City Hall of Dublin. Once a month he would travel to Carrick-on-Shannon to meet up with fellow dreamers on the banks of the river. Together they toiled towards their sacred Republican goal. Those secret political meetings usually started with a prayer and ended up with a drinking session or on a sunny day with a game of cricket. And then, out of the blue, his sons dropped in. They needed to be fed, dressed, and entertained. They needed to be taught love of their country and healthy contempt towards women, who were stupid at best and malicious at worst. Still, Brendan's most arduous task would be to play up the comedy of domestic bliss. He feared that he lacked both stamina and formal theatrical training to keep up the act for too long. The presence of two adult parasites reeking of city pubs and brothels maddened him. The thorns that had been sitting under his thumbnail suddenly decided to come out. Those warm, fatherly feelings everyone had told him about had not awakened in him in 20-some years. So he had already accepted the fact that he was not fated to love his children and that omnivorous primal love that his mother had for them. Still, Brendan held on to the hope of bonding with one of them over the cause. Not all had been lost. In a patriot's heart, there is room for sentimental rubbish. His love is austere and demanding. He is ruled by ideas, not instincts. There is no other way to achieve freedom for the nation. As for his wife, she had long since blended into the landscape. Silently, she roamed the green hills of his estate like a spotted hen without her chicks. As far as Brendan saw it, she had already done her duty, and done it rather shabbily. Since Hugh's birth, she had not been able to carry to term. One after another, pregnancies were terminated at early stages. Eventually, Brendan said to hell with it, and left his wife alone. After all, he was not some cruel beast to drain her aimlessly. One cannot squeeze a whole jug of cider from a single withered apple. He took advantage of his marital privileges and frequently without any gusto. At the same time, not being innocent to vanity, he liked showing Marin off to his mates. It meant a great deal to him that everything in his life would be a notch above average. His sons, however useless, boasted college diplomas. When and where they would have the opportunity to apply that knowledge remained to be determined. A piece of paper would never hurt. Higher educational institutions had started admitting Catholics, and Brendan insisted on shoving his children into the avant-garde of the Irish academic elite. His wife, a lousy homemaker, knew a few French phrases that can play harp, which instantly elevated her above the rest of the Roscommon matrons. That alone warranted keeping her around like an impractical utensil, like a silver tray. "For God's sake, woman, do something useful for a change," he said, laying a heavy hand on her velvet-padded shoulder. "Set the table, arrange to have a boar slaughtered, put out a jar of pickles and a platter of baked spuds. Get that bottle of Drambuie that Walsh gave us at Christmas time. The occasion calls for it. Can I rely on you for once?" Marin nodded silently. The instructions to slaughter a boar was dispensed just for the hell of it. The last pig had been butchered last week. Brendan realized he would probably have to be content with chicken wrapped in bacon. The taste was practically identical. The bottle of Scottish honey liqueur was already half empty. Brendan had forgotten that he and Walsh had cracked it after a game of golf. They were so drunk they just kept opening everything in sight, not bothering to read the labels. Marin could always add some poutine and add a few spoons of sugar to bring the taste as close to the original as possible. She always had a backup solution for every domestic dilemma. Brendan would never know the difference. "Make sure everything's ready by 7, he said as he mounted his horse. "I better round up the neighbors. Of course, half of them are at the tournament, as if out to spite. I must get them before they scatter." Marin would not dare to suggest that they reschedule the dinner party for another time. Brendan was determined to host a gathering that very night. Tomorrow was never promised. For all he knew, a war would break out the next day, which would mean they would have to leave without having a crack. "May I come with you, Daddy?" Dylan invited himself merrily. Brendan frowned. The last thing he needed was that freckled, babbling fool in tow. "Don't be daft. You're tired from the trip. You cannot go anywhere looking like that. Go powder your nose, princess. You and your little sister. Make yourself presentable for the guest. I'm a lucky bastard indeed, having fathered such dainty damsels." Dylan and Hugh recoiled hastily. They knew that when Daddy referred to them in the feminine gender, it would be better to get out of his way.